Welcome to this edition of Crema Media's Polity. I'm Sane Dlamini. Political analyst Aubrey Majiki joins me to discuss his thoughts on the upcoming elections. You say the ANC's measure of the popular vote will fall drastically in August, thus signaling the losses it will suffer in 2019. Don't you think they still have time to work on their blunders?
Well, I don't think it will fall drastically. The expectation is that it will. And some might even say it should, given the problems the ANC has been having with its image crisis and credibility crisis, which coincides with the credibility and image crisis of its leader, President Jacob Zuma. So we need to distinguish between two things, whether it should suffer drastic losses in August and whether it will. In my view, is that I think there is consensus that it should, but I don't think it will. I think it will suffer some losses, but the losses are not going to be as drastic as our predictions.
Why do you think the image crisis of President Jacob Zuma is not causing enough collateral damage to the ruling party?
Well, ours is not a presidential system. If the president faced a presidential election, I think the ANC would have had to worry about what would happen to him. But because ours is not a presidential system, given the fact that the ANC has a higher approval rating than the president, one would have thought that the president would cause collateral damage to that approval rating. But ANC supporters and ANC voters tend to distinguish between the party leader and the party. And that is why the party, even in this election, I believe, will have a higher approval rating from voters than the president.
Why do you think DA is not gaining momentum in Ekurhuleni according to the latest polls?
Well, I think Ekurhuleni is one of those areas in the country that are still in the firm control of the ANC. But also demographics in that metropolitan area do not allow the DA, as compared to Johannesburg or Tshwane, to make inroads. And another reason is that the distance between 61%, which is what the ANC got in 2011, and 30%, which is what the DA got in 2011 in Ekurhuleni, is just a bridge too far compared to, let's say, Tshwane, where the ANC was at almost 56% and the DA was at almost 39%. So Tshwane is within grasp. Ekurhuleni isn't. It's just a bridge too far.
The DA is positive that the ANC will lose Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni. Do you agree?
Well, it's like a court case. You can have a witness giving evidence and we are all impressed by the witness's performance, forgetting that the witness's performance is impressive because there has been no rebuttal yet. And once there is a rebuttal, our perceptions about the witness may change. The same thing applies here. On its own, the ANC is in deep trouble. But if we want to assess what's going to happen to the ANC and how well the DA is going to do, it's not enough to look inside the ANC. It's not enough to look at what may be growing levels of antipathy towards the ANC and the president. You must also look at what's going on inside the DA. And you must also look at how the DA is being perceived by voters. And what I think is happening here is that firstly you have the EFF factor. Because of the EFF factor, a factor we did not have in 2011, votes that would otherwise go to the DA because of unhappiness about the ANC will be diverted to some extent, and maybe even to a large extent, to the EFF. And therefore, the DA is highly unlikely to benefit in any serious manner from the unhappiness voters have with the ANC because of the EFF factor. But also, there is also the possibility that ANC voters who are unhappy with the ANC will not be looking for an alternative. Because if you look at protests, violent or otherwise, and you listen to what people are saying in places like Tshwane, they threaten not to vote. They don't threaten to vote for another party, which means these voters see the ANC as a problem and a solution to those problems, and do not see the opposition as an alternative. So there are two possibilities for them. They will either stay at home instead of voting for another party, or will divert their votes to the EFF and some to the DA, or will look at the DA and not see themselves in what the DA is saying and doing, and therefore will either stay in the ANC or go to the EFF or stay at home.
In which of the well-contested municipalities do you think the ruling party will suffer most, and why?
Well, if you look at 2014, the ANC lost support in almost all metropolitan areas. If you look at the metropolitan areas of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, it lost about 10 percentage points compared to 2009. Of course, it's not always wise to compare a local government election to a national and provincial election. But given the trend since 2009, in national elections and provincial elections, there is a suggestion that we can no longer ignore that trend in terms of how it may be reflected to some extent in local government elections. So the possibility here is that even in these local government elections, the national threshold that the ANC achieves in this election may be lower than the national threshold it achieved in 2011 and in 2009 and 2014. So my expectation is that in metropolitan areas such as Ekurhuleni, Tshwane and Joburg, the ANC will lose support. The question is whether it will lose enough support to lose power to another party or to a coalition of opposition parties. I think there we are in uncertain territory. We can speak more certainly, maybe, if we must, about Tshwane. I think, as I said, Tshwane is within grasp as far as the DA is concerned. But I think the EFF factor, in part, will decide what will happen to the DA. Because the EFF, to me, is a problem for both the DA and the ANC. Now, to the extent that the EFF, fighting its first election, will win some support, in Tshwane, that support can only come from ANC supporters, not from the DA. So the problem, as I said, is dual there. The problem for the ANC is that these votes will go to the EFF. For the DA is that those votes will not go to the DA. They will go to the EFF. So I am more certain about the possibility of no party winning an absolute majority in Tshwane than I am of the DA winning Johannesburg. I think Johannesburg will be a bridge too far for the DA, despite the fact that I do expect the ANC to lose a few percentage points. So in my view, the elections that may be easier to read will be the 2022 local government elections, because the result in August 3 will be a downward result for the ANC, even if it maintains to some extent the position it achieved in 2011. But if I am correct that the ANC will trend downward again in this election, then 2019 and 2022 are going to be critical, because if that trend builds into those two elections, then the ANC will be in trouble. Now, of course, we must look at another possibility here. The reason the DA might not do as well as it should is manifold. Firstly, its own internal dynamics, especially the fact that it cannot shake off the perception that it is a racist party of white interests. Now, objectively, as I keep on saying, that may not be true, but the subjective orientation of voters, particularly black voters, is that it is a party of white interests. That it cannot shake off that perception, I think is going to be a problem for the DA in this election. But another problem we're not looking at is the possibility that those voters who are not happy with the ANC are looking for an alternative not only to the ANC, but also to the DA. The question is whether the EFF will fill that gap and do so effectively.
That was political analyst Oprima Jiki speaking to Crema Media's Polity about the upcoming elections.